65 million years ago, dinosaurs fled the Earth to avoid an asteroid crash. 65 million years later, one dinosaur returned, only to discover a planet ruled by humans. And what a mess these humans have made. My name is Ardius Zeradar. After pledging years studying the absurdity of the human race, I determined that I would right the wrongs of this inferior species by exposing its flaws. This is the Ardius Zeradar Show. This is Ardius Zeradar. Welcome back to the Ardius Zeradar Show. I'm really excited to share this particular article with you guys. So I found this just doing a typical EBSCOhost search, and I found by accident this pair of looks like psychologists. We've got Department of Psychology and School of Social Sciences at these universities, one in the United States and one in the United Kingdom. And this is an absolutely scathing expose of the corruption of psychology and psychiatry. And these two scientists from the inside in this journal of medicine expose all the stuff that I was talking about earlier and more. So I show you this to demonstrate that, yeah, we've got people on the inside that are seeing the truth. The truth is here, that psychology is a lie. And man, this was an amazing thing to read. So the main implication they're trying to, or the main assertion they're making here is that the word disease is totally inappropriate when it comes to psychology. Yeah, and think about when you think of diseases. A disease is something that you usually catch, right? Like a virus or a bacteria or something. A disease is something that does not come naturally from the body or from the human being. Wholly inappropriate when we're talking about patterns of behavior or patterns of thought that emerge from human beings. To call these things diseases, why would you do that? Why would you put that particular category on there? Is it because you did a scientific experiment? No. There's no scientific experiment that can determine a category, right? So no scientific experiment can determine whether a category exists. So it's not because of some kind of scientific experiment. Rather, it's the bending of words. This is closer to my field, the field of law. That's what lawyers do, bend words. That's what's really going on here within the psychological and psychiatric fields. Let's dive in. What they have here is just fantastic. I just got to read just a couple passages. In fact, I recommend you all read the whole thing. If you look at the screen, you can see I've got the whole citation there, so go look it up. But I'm going to jump to a couple pages, and you can just see how scathing this is. My goodness, these guys really open the door wide open. You want proof that psychology is flawed? Well, the psychologists themselves know it's flawed, and some of them are exposing it. I can't find the date for this particular article. I think 2000, maybe. So it's over 20 years old, if that's the case. Let's take a look. So they go into a lot of the history of psychology here, so I don't want to get into everything here. I just want to jump to, well, here's issues for using the term disease. Accuracy, validity, reliability, and honesty of the definition should be the foundation of both clinical psychology and psychiatry. The term disease points directly to the choices of treatment. Think about that. That's very interesting. The choices of treatment: medicine, drugs, surgery, hospitalization, electric shock, for using a term as powerful as disease. Think about the consequences. It's a really interesting point. I'm going to jump all the way down here, though, to this page here. And they get into the issue of ADHD. Tables 2, 3, and 4 list a sample of innumerable studies that claim to have found a magical, medically based etiology for ADD, ADHD, depression, and schizophrenia. While one might claim this reflects a healthy scientific atmosphere, closer examination reveals a cornucopia of poorly conducted research. No single study has received overall recognition within the scientific community because every study is of poor quality. Major flaws exist that even graduate students would not make. For examples, for examples, in many studies, the participants were on the psychotropic medication either at the time of the study or for several years preceding the study. These drugs typically produce identical findings that are then improperly attributed to disease etiology, not to the drugs. Often the discussion section of these studies makes scant mention of the significance of such major drug contaminations and confounds. The grant research power of the pharmaceutical companies appears to influence researchers into making unfounded claims. Wow, there you go. There's corruption. And indeed, that is the case. I have friends in the industry, and they say the same thing. It's the money. You are incentivized to get money from these organizations, from companies, or from the government. National Science Foundation is one, for example. And you do what they say, right? It's all about the money. This whole thing we call the peer review system is really the pure corruption system is what it is. So it says, in the 21st century, psychiatric and drug research have become profoundly unethical. This acceptance of false positives is flimsy and indicates weak progress. Very interesting. Very interesting. Acceptance of false positives is flimsy. As I was saying, proof by counterexample. When you find something that goes against the evidence, that's a proof by counterexample, and under the rules of logic, you only need one counterexample to disprove the principle. And yet, in science, they just write these off as anomalies. That shocks the mind when I think about that kind of thing. They look at the average, they say, well, if you look at the aggregate, look at the average, and then the trend seems... But the second you say average, that's the second you're saying, I don't care about counterexamples. I allow false positives because, I have a certain conclusion I'm trying to draw. Too many researchers have abandoned, too many researchers have abandoned slow, meticulous, painstaking, and rigorous research for the fast track of grants, quantity studies, drug promotions, and easy money. It's all about the money. Journal editorship has been similarly compromised. So it is the journals themselves. It is the peer review system that is corrupted. I don't know why people would assume that these things cannot be corrupted. Our three branches of government can be corrupted, and we all know this. We're all used to watching our politicians corrupted, our checks and balances, and we see corruption in our system. We're all used to that. And we know that Rome fell. Checks and balances don't always work. Why do we jump to the conclusion that these scientific checks and balances are somehow better? Many editors allow poor quality research into their journals. Lower review standards are typical in the acceptance of psychiatry drug research. influxes of pharmaceutical advertising and dual appointments on pharmaceutical company boards have compromised the ethics of journal editorial boards. Virtually all mainstream medical journals accept pharmaceutical advertising funds in order to maintain their operating budgets in the black. Wow. They accept pharmaceutical advertising funds. Journals. You get this, now we get into the schools. Universities and medical schools, psychiatry and psychology departments are not monitoring the quality of the research that faculty and staff produce. Have psychiatry and psychology compromised scientific standards in the pursuit of research funds? Definitely worth reading this. So they make citations here at the bottom. I guess I gotta scroll to the back. I guess maybe I'll get to that another a little bit later. But first, I want to get to the page. On this page here, let's see. They keep on going with a scathing attack. Research on levels of neuropeptides is highly confusing and based on faulty logic. Receptor sites have been located in clusters in various areas of the brain. Neurotransmitter involvement has been inferred when drugs are used to treat disorders cluster in these areas. Drugs affect many other areas and numerous cell functions. Therefore, such conclusions of a precise systemic condition cannot be made. The idea of keeping your variables constant, I have definitely noticed that's kind of out of fashion these days to practice true science. The existence of a disease cannot be assumed just because a drug subdues behavior and appears to cluster in a particular locus of control. Baldessarini refers to this manner of deduction as allopathic logic. Yeah, the doors are open wide here, guys. I've shown you the research. Hunt down these citations. I definitely think it's worth cracking open. I have not pursued these yet, but I certainly encourage you to do so. Lack of replicability adds another contamination. So, as I said in my previous episode, replication rates in psychology are lower than 40%, less than a coin toss. Unbelievable. Barkley makes the following statement about ADHD. Misled by research reports that lab measures have differences between ADHD and non-ADHD children, and by the fact that ADHD is a biologically based disorder, many patients asking for medical tests to confirm the diagnosis of ADHD. At present, there are no lab tests or measures that are of value in making diagnosis of ADHD, so blood work, urinalysis, chromosome studies, EEGs, average evoked response MRIs, and computed tomography should not be used routinely in evaluation of ADHD children. James Swanson made an almost identical statement in 1998. This double talk and psychobabble has no place in a responsible medical and scientific community. Definitive scientific declarations that mislead both the public and the professionals should have no place within a healthy, honest, and ethical scientific atmosphere. Definitive statements should be reserved for reports about situations or conditions where facts have been established based on irrefutable data. Well, there you have it. I don't want to... well, I guess I can't go through the whole thing, but I would highly recommend you go through the whole thing and read the whole thing. An expose from the inside. And as I'm finding more and more, these psychologists, they know their study is flawed. And I don't know, they just keep making excuses for it, I guess. I don't remember which citations we were looking at before, but well, here's that Baldessarini. So yeah, we can take a look at some of those numbers, some of that research. So I come back to my original deduction a couple episodes ago. Remember, the deduction was, if a first premise is flawed, then the conclusions will be flawed. The entire study will be flawed. The idea of disease, the idea of normalcy in the psychological field, in the psychiatric field, are flawed. I've demonstrated it in the last 3 episodes. Have I not? If it's not sufficient proof, certainly go ahead and raise your counter arguments. But if they are sufficient, then I've demonstrated that the first principles of psychology are indeed flawed. And if the first principles are flawed, then the conclusions are flawed, and the entire study is flawed. What more must I say? There you have it. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining me at the Artie Stereo Show. That's all I'm going to say. I got no more to say. Have a good day.